Welcome back, everyone. I wonder if we have some comments from your discussion just now.
If anyone would like to say anything, go ahead and unmute yourself, and we'd love to hear from you.
In our group, it seemed as though the socialization or lack of socialization was a big negative in our lives. We didn't have the experiences of being around people of color, or we had really negative experiences from other white people about people of color. One member of our group had a daughter in college that got into a wonderful program that was interracial program, and it sounded like that was truly a wonderful situation, and we all thought that immersion and learning about other cultures and people of color would have benefited all of us a great deal.
Thank you.
We also thought that parents of all races should try to make sure that their children's preschools have dolls of representing all races and colors, and that shouldn't be a burden just for mothers of color.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that.
I could share.
Good comment? Yeah, good.
Okay. Oh, is anyone else going to? I want to make sure I don't take up that space. Okay.
You're fine. You go for it.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Ruwa Hasabala, and I'm Ethar's sister. And I want to say thank you for holding this space. In our group, we chatted about how, depending on the environments that we live in, we are socialized and see what is acceptable. And so I shared that we came to the States 20 years ago from Sudan, which is where we were born, lived in Seattle for 5 years, and have been in Kansas now since 2004, and how each transition has taught us a lot, but also came with its own challenges. There's a culture difference from Sudan to Seattle, and there's one from Seattle to Kansas. And one thing we talked about was, for me personally, it's very interesting because the first time I heard Black is beautiful was here in the States, although I lived in a Black country. And so I shared about how the learned behavior of what's accepted, right? So colorism is also prominent around the world, and skin whitening is $1 billion industry. And so in Sudan, although everyone might be Black, there is also that prejudice toward lighter skinned Sudanese women. And so coming here to the States, I would have a lunch, we called her a lunch lady. She was so sweet. And she would say, Black is beautiful, you know? And so at the same time, when I was 7, it was the first time I learned about racism and how you might be impacted differently based on your color. So I think it's a very interesting space where you are hearing about it's beautiful to be natural and Black, but then you're also witnessing systems of oppression as well. So yeah, that's just a little bit of my own experience.
Ruwa, do you want to share how you learned that you were Black, I guess, at 7 years old?
Yeah, about racism. So I was in a 2nd grade classroom. I had just I was still overcoming the language barrier. So I only knew bicycle and basketball when we moved to the States. And so I didn't understand really what's being said in my classroom. But a girl said to one of my friends in the classroom, she said, I don't like Ruwa because she was Black. I didn't know this, right? But my friend came to me and she said, hey, Ruwa, our classmate shared this, and she said she didn't like you because you're Black. And I understood what that meant. So maybe my English was getting better at that time. So our teacher, she actually found out from my friend, and she sat me and the girl down. What's interesting is the girl was actually Chinese American. And the teacher asked her, why did you say that Ruwa was, you don't like her because she's Black? Did you know that's not nice and that's racist? And the girl said, because there's a Black man at our apartment complex who knocks on our door every night. And I remember at the time thinking, like, that wasn't my dad. Like, why am I a part of this? But I think that goes back to our group's discussion about socialization. And at a young age, you learn what is preferred and what's not. And so that was my first kind of wake up of knowing that there are differences based on skin color.
Thank you, Rua. Thank you very much. Other comments?
I guess I could make a comment, but it's not that important.
Rebecca, why don't you talk about what happened in our group, because you had a pretty good handle on what everybody was saying.
Okay. Anybody else?
You mean me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Well, it was great to have the people talking, like we had, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the name, but we had the discussion about the grandmother with her children that were growing up differently than the children had grown up, and we talked about where they were and the things that they were being exposed to. I brought up, from our founding fathers, and I can't remember the exact details, but it's one of the things that's in it. If you read the book Woke Church, it talks about that when our countries, there were 1,619 slaves that came over with the first boats, and they went to church together, and it was all included. But the first time it was not too long after the church had been built as a building that the blacks were told that they were supposed to go upstairs. And that became the start of the AME church. So it is, it goes all the way back. We talked about, as you talked about the women receiving the right to vote unless they were black, and how much effort really it has taken for different peoples of color to even be recognized as citizens as our nation developed. And I was just typing something in here, and I'm just going to throw it out. I love looking at especially the Black women and noticing, especially as I'm getting older, your skin does not wrinkle as much as mine. So it's a great, I really do think it is beautiful. That's what I'll just say.
Father Fred, you're muted. That's okay.
Okay, Greg, go ahead with the
Okay, thank you.
I am not.
Did we have one more? I think that
one more.
might have been one more comment that was.
Okay, go for it. Let's see.
It's from Rich Walcott, and you need to unmute yourself, Rich.
Yeah, Rich.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, my first relationship with the impact on socialization, I guess, when I went from grammar school up into seventh grade, and of course into high school in the northeastern part of Indiana. And I know Robert's here from Indiana, living in Indiana, but that's a heavy industrial area with a very large immigrant population and blacks. But in the seventh grade, my first impact was the blacks really getting involved in our social clubs in seventh and eighth grade. And of course, they were always involved, and no question there, as far as sports. But even into further high school in this northern Indiana town, they were never shunned away from the clubs, whether it be Spanish club or Latin club or any of the clubs in our high school. And I think true to fact now with busing, which of course happened a number of years ago, I think that kind of broke the barrier as far as the impact on socialization with the blacks integrating now with white students and being a part of this socialization, this whole process of being invited into social groups and socializing and talking with whites. And so that was the first step. But of course now we do have some other challenges with the socialization, but that would be my first experience, and it was a positive one to where I was brought up in this part of northern Indiana. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. Anybody else? Okay, Greg, go for it.
Thank you, Fred. All right, let's move on. Now just listen to my voice and think about what comes to mind when you hear or see the phrase white supremacy. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you think about when you hear the phrase white supremacist? Is it this? Hoods, torches, white supremacist, hangings?
Greg, do you mind if I jump in?
No, Bob, please do.
I shared with Fred and Greg something that I've learned on 2 different continents. And that is that racism is often a conflict between haves and have-nots. And what I mean by that is those who are in power will do everything they can to hang on to that power. And those who are not in power will do everything they can to try to get that power. And so in America, when we hear the phrase white supremacy, in my opinion, it has a lot to do with people who are feeling like they are losing something of value, whether that's perceived or real. And so when people are feeling like they're losing, whether it's an economic level or access to a way of life that they feel like is slipping through their hands like sand, they will do everything they can to hang on to that and perceive people who are different than they are, which gets us into the whole immigration discussion in America, for instance. They will rise up against that because they feel like they are losing their way of life. And so in our country, white supremacy is the appropriate word because whites have been the dominant culture. But sociologists tell us that by the year 2050, whites will be in the minority in America. And that the future voting blocks of those who are white, some have even said this may be the last election where whites dominate. And so there is a backlash happening in our culture because people are feeling like they're losing that which they would call their right to have, because that's what they've always had. And I remember growing up hearing that in the 1960s in Oregon, I remember hearing that America has 6% of the population but consumes 94% of the world's resources. And when you have that kind of lifestyle, our people don't know that that's not the way it is all over the world. And there's a reason why the whole world wants to come to America, because they want what we have had. And yet as they come, they are threatening that which we are trying to hang on to as a way of life. But in reality, from a world view, it's not sustainable. And so we're in with a major conflict, and we're striking back at people who want what we have. And I think that statement, that awareness is essential for whites in this country to understand before we can even begin to dialogue in a place where we are willing to learn and listen.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you. Appreciate that. So you all have had in your mind, Bob helped kind of clarify that as well. The images you have or the thinking you get when you see white supremacy, white supremacists, but it can be what you're seeing in this picture. But what about this?
Yeah.
10 richest Americans, 100% white, 7 of whom are among the 10 richest in the world. The US Congress, 90% white. US governors, 96% white. Top military advisors, 100% white. President and vice president, 100% white. US House Freedom Caucus, 99% white. Current US presidential cabinet, 91% white. People who decide which TV shows we see are 93% white. People who decide which books we read, 90% white. People who decide which news is covered are 85% white. People who decide which music is produced are about 95% white. People who directed the 100 top grossing films of all time worldwide, 95% white. Teachers, 82% white. Full-time college professors, 84% white. Owners of men's professional football teams, 97% white. The only female trooper, state trooper in the Oregon State Police, there is one who retires in a couple of months, leaving them with 0. Is that white supremacy?
Can I make a comment about that?
Of course, Neil.
Well, you look at white supremacist or white supremacy, it goes back to the magic number 1691 when the first African Americans were abducted and brought to this country and owned by somebody else. That's where the whole term white supremacy got started, because that's the way it was then.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, and that's what the power is, that we still want to maintain that power and not give that power up, as somebody just mentioned briefly before about the abdication of power.
Mm-hmm.
We find that abhorrent.
Thank you, Neil. Last week we talked about systemic institutional racism, right? And that means that it's a structure, it's a system. You can kind of see that when you look at this page here. This is from the D'Angelo book, White Fragility. And those are all systems and institutions. So yes, Neil. Yes, Bob. Here's what I'd like for us to do. We've got a lightning round. When you see a circle, that means you're not going in a small group. You go into actually a lightning round. And I'm going to take the slide back in a minute and have you look at it. But here's what I want you to do. Just jot down 1 to 2 words or a short phrase that you feel that best describes your reaction to that slide. All right? 1 to 2 words or a phrase, has to be very short, because we're just going to do a lightning round, which means each one of you are going to come off mute and you're going to say, this is my reaction. Give you just a minute to do that, and then we're going to start the round. What is your reaction to that? Lori, I don't know. Do anybody just want to respond? Just come off mute and just give us your quick hit on it, and then the next person, I just want to hear it. Everyone can listen to this. I just want to get a sense of the group's reaction.
It's mighty white.
Mighty white.
It's appalling.
I have sad, exclusive, and shameful.
Sad, exclusive, shame.
White domination.
Domination. Next.
Deliberate.
Appalling.
We had somebody else in there.
This is Kevin. I said appalling is my reaction.
Next.
White privilege.
White privilege. Next.
I'd say revealing and usurping.
Usurping. Next.
Doesn't reflect the percentage of makeup of the people in this country.
Off balance. Next.
I said horrible. and full of hate.
Horrible, full of hate. Next.
Disgraceful.
Of course.
Of course. Next.
No surprise.
No surprise. Next.
Unrepresentative.
Oh, okay.
Next.
Shameful.
Yeah, that's what's said.
Yeah.
Yes. Next.
Racism is political.
Political. Next.
Racism is in everything.
In
It's
everything.
all pervasive.
Pervasive. Next.
And on my part, ignorance. I had no idea the balance was that slighted, that slanted.
Shameful.
Entrenched power.
Entrenched power.
One thing that comes to mind is that racism won't go away unless we address systems instead of just people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And money talks.
Money talks.
People got elected.
It's unfortunate and a loss for everybody.
Very good, everyone. You did a great job looking at that. And we are getting close to the end of our time together this week. Let me just kind of start to close it a little bit, linking to what you just said. Remember, before I go over this, just you are here. What you just all said is pretty negative. It's very, very powerful. It's very, that is one of the purposes of our conversation. We're going to talk about things that are difficult, but the ease in which you expressed yourself and called it what it was is great. And that is part of our work. So take that with you this week and think about strategies in which you can engage further in these conversations, to name it when you see it, call it out, and to engage in strategies to create a different reality, a different narrative about racism and white supremacy. The response to that slide is exactly as we had hoped. It's just, you don't see it that way oftentimes. We don't see it that way as white folk, the pervasiveness of it. And then, of course, the systemic and institutional nature of it is very clear when you start looking at it that way. So racism is a structure, it's not an event. White supremacy does not refer to white people and their individual intentions or acts. It really is about an overarching political, economic, social system of domination that's been in place. And there's all these different facets that go around it.
Could I say something, Greg?
Yes.
I'd like to just add as we wrap up that next week, when Taylor Morrow III will be our guest appearance, our guest. How's that? And we asked him when we interviewed him a few weeks ago, just to open his heart. He's African American, and tell us what he's been through and what it's all been like in his life. He's been active in many organizations. He's somebody you're going to really enjoy. You're going to learn from him. And he's promised he'll open his heart and tell you what life has been like. I would also ask you, looking at the numbers that we have today, where it's gone very well, and bring somebody with you next week. Because we need to share these words. We need to spread this out as much as we can. And so bring somebody next week that can also join us. Tell your friends about us, and we'd love to have them. So have a great week, and we'll see you soon.
Bye all.